So welcome to this ridiculously large class. I don't think I've taught a class quite this large here. So that's kind of exciting and also kind of scary because the nature of this class is that there's lots of group work and there's already quite a bit of a time crunch with things like, we talked about this, when we get to our client meetings, I have to get through every single group in one lab period. The more people there are in the class, the more groups there are. The more groups there are, the less time we have per group. So I am adapting to having this many people in this class in a way that I have not. Roll with the punches. I certainly will have to. So yeah, this class is certainly a beast. I want to set the precedent from the very beginning that there is a lot to this class. There are a lot of learning outcomes. There's a lot of difficulty associated with not only the technical requirements that I will be throwing at you, but also just the inner working of being in a group and communicating. I will have structure for all of that via I believe, 12-point grading rubric for each sprint. So you will know exactly what you're being graded on, and the goal of all of that is to help you through a process that will be healthy as part of being part of a development team. But expect there to be lots of things to work on throughout that process. But I am here to support you through all of that. I suppose I should probably introduce myself since I don't know absolutely every one of you. I know most of you from some place or another, which is nice. But I'm Chris Kane, nerd at heart. I have lots of Magic cards up in my office. If anyone ever wants to play Magic on campus, I have set cubes put together. I have commander decks you can borrow.
What style do you play?
All of them.
All of them. I only play fire control.
Oh yeah. Yeah, Magic is something that I love to indulge myself in whenever I find myself with it, which is getting less and less. But I play video games. I teach all of the game design and development courses. I am in the process of designing a master's concentration for AI and machine learning for cyber. I also have significant interest in artificial intelligence and machine learning. I've been thrown into the software engineering side of things from no one else wants to teach it. So is this my absolute area of specialty that I spent a ton of time studying? No, but I have enough experience to know what works, what doesn't. And I mean, the general principles are the general principles. There's not too much that can go wrong there. I do not want to make that change. Moment, thank you. As for the question in chat, yes, the labs will be in 219 starting next week. So let's start going through this lovely beast of a document. I guess I can start by saying I did mention that I would be recording and live streaming as I am doing today. We have at least one person joining us remotely. Let me just show you in Canvas. You can easily just go to modules, and from modules, there's going to be a bunch of information here that you don't need to see. What is revealed, though, are the course tools. In that is the Zoom link for attending remotely, as well as any recordings that are posted to my YouTube channel. There's links to my YouTube channel. Do note that at that channel, there is every lecture for every class that I've given at Eastern. So if you're curious what happened last year when I taught this course, that's all up there. What is some other course that I teach like? All of that material is up there. I don't monitor it too much. I don't try to monetize it at all. There's nothing associated with that. It's just for Eastern students. It's not even that publicly accessible. But feel free to peruse that. It is of interest to you. Back to our syllabus. So meeting location is already wrong. I noted that I actually want a lab for this class. So we're going to be meeting in 219 starting next week when we're actually doing real lab work and board work. So what labs will look like moving forward next week, there will be a Git-based lab that you all will do to get familiar, no pun intended, with Git. I have a bunch of Git-related puns that will probably find the light of day throughout the course. Git commands that if I were writing Git, I would make, like Git alive just uninstalls it.
What does it do? Uninstall all of the IDEs on their computer?
Yeah. Go out, socialize, get away from
Touch some
your-
grass.
Yes. So also office hours, those are correct. They are after my last morning class of the day. So this class does not meet in the mornings, Wednesday and Friday. So my office hours are an hour earlier on those days when I get out of compilers. Just for reference, there will be compilers followed by this class in this room in the mornings. So you will probably see that you have to wait outside a little bit because I tend to go long on classes, especially that involved that require that much explanation. I will still try to start class on time. I don't like wasting people's time or money. Office hours are super important to me. This class, a little bit less technical with regards to the office hours. I won't be able to solve too many of your technical problems. As you start into your group projects, you will find that you run into some technical issues that are unique to your application. And I won't be able to help with those really without diving deeply into your code. How did you implement this? Who wrote this? Who wrote that? Why? What were the principles behind? There's so much for me to do to even start interfacing with your code that unless you have written beautiful documentation and your code is gorgeous, in which case you probably figured out the bug yourself already, then there's not too much that I can do within the time constraints that I would have, given the amount of attention that will be demanded of me, considering I'm teaching my most demanded courses and 3 of them. That said, I do frequently extend these office hours, so if you have a question outside of these hours, just stop by my office and let me know. And I will see you, I'll see you as soon as I can. Office hours are my favorite interactions as a professor because I get a chance to know you. I get to understand where you're coming from, where you're going in your career, in your education here at Eastern. So I can help you to get a sense of utilize any expertise I have to help with whatever you're struggling with on your career path. So I enjoy those kind of individual conversations, getting to know you, trying to help you out to whatever extent that I can. Don't shy away from office hours. I love to see people, and even if it's just to chat. I won't be able to extend them quite as much as I historically have, due to the fact that I'm still creating that 3rd course that I'm teaching this quarter. Is it absolutely done? No, it's about half done. So I have a good bit of content creation work to go when you're making a class from scratch. It's a lot of work. So I may have to redirect you to some other resource, but I will find that resource for you. One of them is going to be our TA, Julie Pritchard, who is phenomenal. I do not yet know what her hours will look like on campus. I need to meet with her to figure that out. We're meeting tomorrow, so I will have more information for you in the next day or two with regards to her availability, when you should go to her for something versus me. All of that will come in the near future. Bunch of related course outcomes, lots of outcomes because we're doing lots of work. The textbook, I have a link in here to the textbook. It's also in Canvas and should be revealed. So publishers have released the textbook for free, no cost. I should, though, bring it up and show you what is meant. This frequently comes up. We'll follow this, right? Yeah, we can control it. Okay. So you can read online, download PDF, doesn't matter. When I say section 1 or section 2 of this textbook, as you'll see at the bottom of the syllabus, it just means starting after the introduction. Section 1 is the myth of the genius programmer and everything that is indented from there. That is all section 1. Then the next is section 2, section 3, section 4, section 5. There are 6 total sections. And so when we are set to have a discussion about some of the material that we read in the book, because there's a lot to dissect when it comes to working with people and debugging teams. Those are the sections. So not the introduction, starting with section 1, with Genius Programmer, section 2, building an awesome team culture. Starting from there. For my own policies, if you email me, I guarantee you a response in 24 weekday hours. And by guarantee, I mean, if I see it, I will do that. If I don't forget about it, I will do it. What that means for you is if 24 hours elapse, something happened. I forgot about it. I didn't see it in the first place. Sometimes I just fail to get notifications and it just scrolls right off my inbox despite scrolling down and looking for those unread messages. I have occasionally missed one. If that happens to you, it's not because I hate you. It's because I get too many emails. People should stop emailing me as frequently, and then I would see more of them. I'm kidding. Don't use that as an excuse to not email. But if I do get an email from you and you don't get a response in 24 hours, it's not personal. Please send a follow-up. Your email is important to me. I want to get back to you. Hopefully it doesn't take 24 hours. We already talked about office hours. This is a very collaborative based classroom. I do not grade anything based on you versus anyone. If anything, all you can do is build each other up. And the more you build each other up, the more it's going to look good, regardless of how the math for the course shakes out. As with all of my classes, I curve rigorously at the end of the course, only ever up. So any grade that you see is a grade floor in Canvas. It is the worst possible grade that you could get. And typically the math works out to where I'm not happy with my own final grades. So I shift them up before I enter them until I'm happy with them. And the more I get to know you and see how your team works, and we'll talk about all of the communication avenues you have for that, the more I understand that, the better sense I get of, at the end of the quarter, is this grade something that this student earned? The more I interact with you, the better sense of that I have. If I am unhappy, I feel like you've put in more work, you've put in more effort, it showed, then I start to become unhappy with grades that aren't good grades. If that's what's in front of me, I try to go figure out why is that? Are there missed assignments? Is there just a really bad day in there? And I use that cumulative information to just curve the class up until I'm happy with the grades. And I feel like the grades that are in front of me are the grades that you earned. So I never curve that down. I never think, well, that student got lucky, let's change their grade. Never do that, only ever curve up. But that is something to expect with regard to grades. If you have any questions about that as the quarter progresses, I'm happy to talk to you about my current mindset with regards to what I've seen from you, what I would do if the quarter ended today. Something like that. I want to be as open a book as I can. Expectations for you. The class is pretty involved and engaged. If anything, the lab meetings are super important because you'll be working with your team and or giving a client presentation in almost all of those labs. So you will be letting your team down if you are not there to work through the design with them. They may use this against you when it comes to the peer reviews that we'll talk about in a bit. So make sure that you are communicating your availability, anytime that you're missing with your team. And then we can go from there. As far as lectures, I will be recording and posting those lectures. So if you miss a day of lecture, it's not the end of the world. If you're sick, please don't. Please stay home. I really appreciate trying to stay healthy. If you get sick, usually there are remote opportunities. If I get sick, I spread it to all of you trying to hold class when I'm sick, or I have to cancel class or find some other way of dealing with that. And there's no space for that in a class like this. I cannot afford to cancel class once. It's that jam-packed from start to end. It's really a 20-week course that is masquerading as a 10-week course. I try not to slay you with that and try to do as much as I can with the 10 weeks, but every day that we miss just compounds. I have actually not canceled a class in my entire academic career, so I'm trying to keep that pace going. And what that means is I will support you if you get sick. You let me know. If you're not feeling well, I'll go out of my way to make sure that it's an equal opportunity, that I'll extend deadlines for you if you're that out of it. Communicate with me, let me know. We'll figure out a way to keep you caught up in the class without inconveniencing the rest of your group mates, me, with disgusting illnesses. So, thank you for that. This course has both a lecture component and a lab component. The lecture component will mostly be software engineering principles. We're going to cover, I'll show you the schedule at the bottom of the course. typical semester-based grading policy. So I know it says truncation out to the decimal. I don't necessarily hold myself to that. Sometimes I round, sometimes I bump the whole class up, but I reserve the right to truncate out to the decimal depending on how things shake out. So your true grade floor is the number that you have truncated out to the decimal. That's the true floor. I don't usually do that. The grading policy looks simple at first until you realize that the project 80% is broken down into components of components of components. But in general, 80% quarter-long project, 20% 4 quizzes throughout the quarter. They will be designed to be very quick quizzes, about 30 minutes or so, but I will give people the whole class period to do it. So we'll be doing those some Fridays, not every Friday, only 4 of them. But usually that's weeks 3, 6, 9. I have them down at I have the actual full schedule here. So I guess quiz 1 is during week 3, quiz 2 is during week 5, quiz 3 is during week 8, and I actually don't know if I will hold quiz 4 on week 9 or not, but we'll see. We'll see as we get there. This is just an estimate based on historically what I've been able to do.
Not supposed to be meeting on Fridays over.
Not Friday, sorry, Thursday.
Thursday.
Yes, last meeting of the week. Thank you for that. I
During
would
the lab day?
totally would have forgotten.
Will we be doing it during the lab day?
No. No, labs are gonna be full of other stuff. So
Oh,
the
that's
lecture
not-
period, that would be Thursday, 10 a.m. Sorry, my bad. I say Friday, like, of course, every class meets on Friday. Ours does not. Let's see. Further on the grading policy. Project is a big part of this course. So we'll be, as soon as I am done going over this, the very next order of business will be to form those groups. I know some people have been talking about the groups that they want. That's fine. Those of you who have not been doing that, we will find you a group. But we'll be looking for ideally 5 members. And since there are a few more than 40, which would go in evenly, a few groups will have a 6th member and an associated ramp up with the amount of work that is expected from having 6 people in your group. So 4 to 6 members, really 5 to 6 members. So the project is broken down into, again, these are totals under the entire course, not totals within this subsection. So 60% of your overall course grade are the evaluations for the 4 sprints that you will submit. These are just checkpoints where I expect there to be a fully functional program that meets the requirements that the client set forth at the beginning of the sprint. Then we'll have a client meeting and the client will say, I also want this and this and this and this and this. And we'll figure that out. That'll become the next sprint. You'll implement that over the next couple of weeks, submit a full working project. And we'll iterate that 4 times. And at the very end of that, we'll have something that represents the best that we can do in 10 weeks. Not that 10 weeks is a lot of time. 10% is a final code submission. After sprint 4 is due the Sunday before finals, but throughout finals week, since there's nothing going on in this, aside from potentially some presentations, then there is just time for you to fix bugs. And so the evaluation for the final code submission will be the exact same rubric as the sprint 4 rubric, except now that you've had an extra week to really iron out any last minute bugs. I do that so that you can show this project to employers and be happy about it. Not just this was the buggy mess that was at the end of the quarter that I didn't get a chance to go back and fix and clean up. I want you to have the chance to go fix it and clean it up and get a grade for the final product that you would not be embarrassed to show others. 5% is a daily stand-up completion. So we'll all be getting Discord groups. It's something that will be coming over the first week or so of the course. I'll have Julie set up a bunch of Discords for each group. You'll all be in there. I'll be in all of them, monitoring technical Agile-based communication. But part of that is going to be every day this class meets, there is a requirement sometime between midnight and midnight that you post an update as to 3 components, what you're working on, what you've completed since the last time you wrote a stand-up, and anything that you're stuck on or hit a roadblock on that maybe you could use some assistance. So that'll be required for every member of your group every day that the class meets. I actually recommend doing it more frequently than that, especially if you're doing significant amounts of work over the weekend. The more communication you have with your group, the better. But since the class only meets during those days, I would feel bad placing requirements on people for submitting something at potentially inopportune times. And finally, a 5% coming from a final presentation. It'll just be a demo of your final working project, answering any questions that people have about how you designed things, how you implemented things. And since we're all working on the same project, seeing the differences between how people did what and why it works or why it doesn't is a very interesting component of those final project presentations. So sprint and final code submission grades are consistent among all of the group members, but they get scaled by your peer reviews. So I have an incredibly complex formula for calculating that scaling, and I can give you a sense of what that looks like. The basic idea is if you get an average, so you grade yourself and your group mates on both effort and technical contribution from 1 to 10 every week that we have a sprint. From there, I look at what is the overall rubric grade. How does your overall grade compare both to that and to the average of the other group mates? Basically, did you beat the average of everyone in your group? Did you not? Also, what is the difference between your own self-score and your coworkers' scores for you? All of those are components that get fed in to determine whether or not you were an exemplary member of your team, an average member of your team, or a weak link in your team. If it's close to what your overall project scored, reasonably close within some amount of error bar, no change. If it's significantly higher, I'll bump your grade up a little bit. If it's significantly lower, I'll bump down your grade a lot. So it very quickly scales off if you're not within a fairly close 1 to 2 point margin of, so maybe your group performs at an 85% for a sprint. If your average peer reviews are a 7.5 or higher, you're probably fine. If you're getting lower than that, then one, I should be talking to you because it should not come as a surprise. Your group mates should also be talking to you about, I have concerns. I need to see these things fixed. It's giving me anxiety. But yeah, if you're scoring significantly lower than that, then I will be talking to you, not just in a bad way, but in a, do you feel the same way about the project? How could I help support you? It's meant not to be a scare tactic, but it's meant to make sure that everyone is pulling their weight. But yes, your grade will quickly fall off if you are dead weight. And that ensures that everyone in your group is performing at the best level that they can right now, which is also why I break it down into effort and technical contribution. Not everyone is at the same level with regards to your technical standards. That's okay. Half of the weight is going to come from how hard are you trying? How well are you communicating? I very frequently see high effort scores, lower technical contribution scores. They average out, you end up just fine. As long as you're doing the best that you can and learning, that's all I care about. And obviously I want to be as transparent as I can be throughout that process. So if you have any concerns, please do speak to me. Don't just let that boil over. I will work with you to figure out what's wrong, what's going on, or to help you communicate with teammates who you feel aren't pulling their weight. This should be equally spread. We're all technically competent by this point, at least somewhat. A lot of that will continue to grow in this course. But communication is where it all starts, which is why this can get a little bit hairy if communication is not happening to a healthy extent. So that's the breakdown for the group project. So consistent there. Then there is the metric that I use to scale your peer review and scale the evaluation scores based on that. So peer evaluation is just graded. I expect everyone to submit that on a weekly basis. It's graded just on sincere attempt. So tell me how you feel. There will be comment places for you to talk about why that person got that score. I don't share that with them, but I will collect all of that information to determine, do I need to speak to anyone about any concerns that I have. Quizzes, they will happen. Closed book, closed notes, one double-sided sheet of notes for each quiz. I do that across all my classes. I think I actually failed to mention that in compilers this morning. So if anyone in compilers, any examination is always front and back, 8.5 by 11. I don't care what you put on it. I'm not going to collect it afterwards. You can collaborate, use the same sheet copied with friends as you study together, as you prepare for things together. But what that means is that how I design a lot of my assessments is not regurgitated material, but is actually critical thinking, applying concepts. I don't want you to be able to look up the answer on your note sheet. What I want you to do is not have something like what was that? We covered that, but I don't remember what that was. The information should be there on your sheet for you to refer to understand that, and then apply it to the question so that we're all on a equal problem solving basis. But I try to put analysis and problem solving on my exam as much as I can. That means they're harder. That means that there's a lot more to study for, but I also release study guides at least 1 week before the exam. We'll have at least a study portion of a period likely before the day before we take an exam. So if it's quiz. If it's on Thursday, we'll either have it before the quiz, before we start, or it will be the Tuesday before that. They don't want to take lab time. I do collect quizzes after we go over them. I don't really want them out there. I occasionally reuse types of questions or problems, and I don't really want that getting out too much. But I do keep them in my office, at least as long as until you graduate. So if you ever want to see any old quizzes or exams from any of my classes, I will have them until you graduate. I try to keep everything consistent throughout the week because scheduling is a nightmare. So peer reviews will always be due Tuesdays at midnight. So the day before our lab periods. The sprints will end Sunday night. So that gives you 2 days after that to submit a peer review, and then for the week that happened, the Tuesday will be for the amount of time, kind of the Monday to Monday time of working on that. Sprints will be due on certain Sundays, and then we will have any discussions that we do on Monday classes. So any chapters that we assign, I want to give you at least a weekend to read it, think about it, dissect it, before we come talk about it. University policies that I have to put in here. Any questions about that, let me know. Let's actually talk about the course schedule. I'm pretty good at adhering to this at this point, or with the exception of exactly where quiz 3 and quiz 4 fall exactly. But this has been historically pretty much spot on for what I'm able to do. So material we'll cover is in black. Next Monday is when we will have our first discussion over chapter 1 or section 1 of the textbook. So please have that read by Monday's class so that I can query some questions to the class so that we can start a discussion about some of that content.
So read chapter with section 1 by Monday.
Yeah. It's not super long. It shouldn't take people more than at most an hour. And especially before we get things really kicked into gear. So we certainly have time. The following week, we'll have chapter 2. We'll be starting the entire process at the start of next week. So our very first sprint will be starting on Monday. Luckily, I think we actually have 3 weeks for that first sprint if we started on Monday. So I want to get people off on the right foot here. So quiz 1, the Thursday of week 3. So you can see that I set dates for this, starting with Monday, so technically before class starts, but Wednesday through Friday is this first week. So this is week 1. Then next week will be week 2. You can see the associated dates. So quiz 1, Thursday of week 3. And you can see that it just starts cycling. Week 4 is our sprint 1 showcase before the sprint is due. So I guess I can explain this. Every other lab period, starting on that week 4, the lab period will be meeting with the client. Almost all of you will be in the lab working diligently. The client and I will be in a separate room and we will be calling in groups one at a time to present their work to the client. And the client will play around with your program, ask questions about the usability, about the design, request some changes with regards to the design. A lot of the client meeting is just design focused. It's not technical. This client may not know anything about computer science. I don't know. I've never met Tony Espinoza before.
Oh, I can tell.
I don't know the non-technical version of Tony. He can invent whatever persona he wants for this, even though he doesn't usually do a great job.
He's the dean, right? Is he the dean of computer science?
No, we actually have a new interim dean.
He's the network. The guy
Yeah,
with
he
the
teaches
long hair.
networking. He's a cyber professor.
Got it.
Yeah, super friendly, very nice and accessible. Loves doing this. He did it last time I taught this course and did a great job. So what my job is, while you are presenting to the client, is to take notes on things like professionalism, mannerisms, things of the sort, because this is supposed to be a professional presentation. What I don't care about is what you come in wearing. I don't care if you appear professional in your attire, but I expect your demeanor and your communication to be respectful. Things like don't all hover around the client while the client is using your computer and reach over and try to do things for them in their personal space. Things like that I will take notes of and give feedback on. But you get a small client presentation score that is a small part of each sprint on just how satisfied was the client with functionality. Note that this is before the due date for each sprint. This is the Wednesday before it's due Sunday night. What that means is the usability part of your program has to be done or very close to done, mocked by then. You can go fix any last minute technical issues between Wednesday and Sunday and take into account anything that the client says about the usability of your program. I don't like all of this text cluttered right here. Can you spread it out somewhere so that it's more easy to see and visualize all at once? I don't like how much scrolling I have to do to be able to do this or that. Reduce the amount of scrolling. Stuff, feedback like that is just so that you have the best version of your code to be submitted by that drop dead Sunday deadline. What else? Question.
Is this a real client? Is the software does he actually need that software?
He does not, but we are going to pretend that he is, and he is going to pretend that he does.
Okay.
So yeah, the project is going to be a UML editor for those of you who know what UML is. Those of you in 212 or who took 212 probably had a unit on it at some point. I will be presenting it from scratch, like no one knows anything about it during one of these intro classes. But the goal is to be able to provide both a command line and graphical tool to be able to visualize code bases. Things like the associated classes and their internal representations, relationships between classes. So you're going to make a model that someone can use to represent their code. It's a used application out there. There are lots of professional ones that you can go get inspiration from.
It's like the concept similar to like Unix's Midnight Commander interface.
Yeah, actually, pretty similar.
Is it called the UML what?
UML
Editor.
yes.
Thank you.
So one of the very last, I should spoil it. One of the very last things you will submit as part of this is just an image that is your UML editor with the structure of the internal representation of your UML editor. So it's very meta. The classes and objects and relationships between the classes that make up the internal representation of your UML editor in your UML editor. It's pretty fun. I really enjoy seeing those, how complex they are, how the inner working works. It's a lot of fun. So that'll be part of your final presentation and final sprint requirement. Other questions? Yeah.
Do we meet in person at week 12 though?
No, that's just finals week. So I guess usually, and I'll see how the course goes, that's the final slot is reserved for some of the group's presentations. If I cover enough material fast enough, maybe that's not necessary, but it is a university mandate that every class meets during its finals period. Not everyone adheres to that, as far as I am aware, but yeah, I typically try to use it for something productive if there is something productive left to do. If there's nothing productive left to do, I'm not going to make people show up for no reason. But historically, there have been good presentations to be had during that period.
So is this like a fancy flow chart then?
Yeah.
Are you a UML text editor? Are you UML editor?
Yeah, there are class boxes, arrows, but I will provide some fun technical challenges for you to make it user-friendly and optimized to some interesting extents. Things like, how do relationship arrows work when there's an object here, an object here, an object here, an object here, and the relationships are very complicated if we don't want any overlapping arrows, and we want it to be easy to see and visualize. So there are routing problems associated with where do we draw those arrows? When you click and drag, how frequently do you update? Does the relationship arrow update and change itself on the fly as you're dragging? That will come up, and that will eventually be a requirement. So lots of fun technical requirements to come. So here's everything we plan to cover. Any other questions before we dive into the meat of the class, figuring out who you're going to hate by the end of the quarter?
We don't get to choose.
Choosing
Our-
group members. Yep.
Oh, we do.
Yep, I am not going to assign them. I want you to work with people who either you know you work well with, you think you will work well with, or you really want to make an enemy of. A couple of voices of caution, I guess. I have seen friendships ruined by this class, so think critically about working with your best friends or with people you want to maintain a connection with. There's one thing, sharing a hobby in common. It's another thing when they haven't finished and submitted their code for testing at 11:30 p.m. when something needs to be submitted by midnight and they're AWOL and you can't get a hold of them and you can't test any of your code with anything that they've done. It can get very frustrating and very heated. So be careful of who you choose to work with. It's almost better, I think, to work with strangers and get to know each other in a nice collaborative work-based setting because you have nothing to ruin on the line. That said, you're free to do what you want. I don't have any control over you, nor do I want to.
Yes, think.
All right.
Any
Strangers
questions
or
on?
together?
So I guess I should give a little bit of background info before we break in and do this.
You sure? Okay.
I can technically
Yeah.
allow any programming language, but I highly recommend that people consider Java. The reason is that's what most of you and most of your group mates are going to have the most experience with. If you really want to use another language, I'll allow it. The hesitation I have is every group that has picked a language that isn't Java has come back to me at the end of the quarter and said, don't ever let people choose a language that's not Java. It's very doable. I have seen successful C++ projects, although it's fun the day that on Git, it goes from being a C++ project to being a JavaScript project. Because C++ does not have the built-in graphics capabilities that most other languages have. So you will be implementing a lot of that logic from scratch if you choose C++. Python, if you choose Python, make sure you're starting in an object-oriented version from the beginning and give out the project in an object-oriented fashion. I have historically had projects where we discover in the middle of sprint 2 that there is not a single object created and a massive refactoring project is underway very early and it's very painful. easier to just start from scratch. Questions about group selection? So we're looking at about 5 members. Let's cut off at 5, and if there's any stragglers at the end of that, then we will go for a 6th member. I'm going to try to divide the room into kind of where you are at the moment in that process. So how much room is there in the back? Enough. Let's say if you're looking for a group and have not yet solidified a group, be in the back somewhere. If you have a partially formed group and are looking for more members, be off to the sides. And if you have a group that is fully formed, sit down somewhere next to each other. This is the most important decision you will make all year. No pressure. You guys have 5? Our own instructions, yes. Sit down somewhere. Alright. For those partially formed groups and or those who are still in the back, hold up a number with the number of group members that you have. All right, so we have a 3, a 4, and you guys are a 5. So I think for now, you all should be good. Find a place to sit next to each other. Grab your stuff from wherever you are. You're now best friends. You see how long it lasts. So it's gonna last. 4 and 3. Sorry? Yeah, I can take at least one group of 6. So, as awkward as this is, I think what we need to do is form a group of 5 or 6, and then someone else is gonna have to join a group that is currently 5. So the question is, which of these 2 groups wants to split up? How attached are you to working with each other? So we have 2 partial groups, we have a 4 and we have a 3. I'm thinking what we can do is create a 6 and the odd member out joins one of our current groups of 5. So is there? Yeah. Those 3 working together for sure? Please. All right. Is there any one member of your group of 4 that is least interested in working together and or is okay working with another group?
I can split off, that's fine.
Okay, so we have a group of 6 here then. And then raise your hand if you're a group of 5. Pick of the litter. You can join any group that's raised their hand without, as long as they assent. Obviously, you have to agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a survivor.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get to this.
I try not to exert too much control over this process, but I probably should.
I swear, if you end up running a reality show, got a bad experience with being friends.
Me too, we're everywhere. And I have to live with them.
Okay, that'll make us.
Okay, now that we're in groups and we finalize this, I can now state that these may not be finalized for the entire quarter. I do reserve the right to move people around as need necessitates or for the good of the order. So this happened once, last time I taught this course, I ended up moving people who just clashed with the naturally emerging leaders. So I just did a leader shuffle, finding groups that I thought would benefit better from particular leadership styles. So I will be monitoring the health of the groups. Please communicate that with me as well if you become unsatisfied, and I can see what I can do. There are some great learning outcomes with figuring out how to overcome that adversity, but there definitely is a point where it's just too much. And if it gets to that point, I can shuffle it around, and there's a lot to be learned from learning a new code base, learning new style that is consistent across your new group, interfacing with that. That is something that happens all the time in industry. You join an already existing project and you need to understand its code base. You need to interface with people who have been working on it daily for a long time. So I am open to giving people that task or role throughout the quarter. I find it is more distracting than it is useful in a small scale setting like this. So I tend not to do it unless it is necessary. That said, I reserve the right to. Any questions on groups? Are we as satisfied as we can be? Anyone who's dissatisfied, come talk to me. We can figure it out. All right. So I guess the next order of business, and we can take a little bit of time for this. There'll be plenty of time to not have fun later. Come up with a team name for yourselves. This doesn't have to absolutely happen and be nailed down today, but it's something that I'm going to be requiring of you as soon as I give you your first dummy assignment, which is going to be just to, if you don't already, create a GitHub account and tell me your GitHub username. I will need your Discord username, and then so that we can add you to the class, add you to our Discords, and then your team name, so that I make sure everyone with the same team name gets added to the same Discord. Very easy assignment, 3 points. But yeah, that team name will be how I figure out who goes with what, since I don't have all of your names and faces memorized yet. So spend a few minutes, think of something good, terrible, or anywhere in between. Anywhere in between, great name for a team.
That's great.
Hey guys, maybe we got our emails next to our name.
I think we're gonna be canceled.
Oh, that's good. Anthony.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice to meet you.
Alright, team name.
I've seen people leave themselves other groups too, that's great. To know each other a little bit. Humanize yourselves.
Yeah, I think everybody.
And then you get.
Anyone have ideas?
That's true. I have not been a computer. Myself.
Face number one.
Yeah.
It's really awkward, you're a professor.
That's what words.
I have to do it 12 times, but I still don't know what it is, and this is all my fault.
Or like insane guys.
Where possible, 3 ways, B, you know what?
And then beige units, EAZ.
Actually great.
Time is coming, so down, it's not a goal. No, it's been long.
Yeah, everything. Yeah, they said our project.
Tony will be.
You know, they're my dogs, sweating. Steering for up the back.
I'll give you 1 minute to wrap up your conversation, and we'll come back to it.
Right now,
It's amazing how much this kind of. Look, I mentioned that I was going to questions. Let's help us ask my son. You're not spending too much time there. That's all we're going to my dad. I go on vacation. Yeah. The first thing I'm going to say, you can French. So like, how many years will it really sound? Point out something in this wish.
We're on all this.
All right, so let's bring it back in. Hopefully people have had a chance to start thinking about their projects. Yeah. All right, bring it back in. The client randomly entered. So I guess I can introduce the client. For those of you who don't know the client, Tony Espinoza, cyber professor and all around excellent human being. Hope so. I mean, at least from the interactions that I've had. I suppose I don't know you well enough to know for sure if you're an excellent, well-rounded human being, but from all of our interactions, I have no evidence on the contrary.
I appreciate it. I will be here for 3 of the 4.
Yeah,
things. I can't make one of them, but sprint 3, I won't be. So.
Yeah, we will have someone pretending to be Tony, pretending to be a technological knowledge.
Well, just be like my MSN.
Yes. Yes, but we will figure that out when it happens. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, you'll see him plenty later than alert. Okay, I skipped over one very important part of the syllabus that I need to go back and mention because I'm frequently scatterbrained and don't write notes for myself in regards to exactly what I need to cover. So the AI policy for the course is kind of important to cover because as you get deeper and deeper into your curriculum and I teach more and more of your classes, The AI policy starts to get a little bit more relaxed and a little bit more relaxed as you start to know how to do things, and it saves you time to use AI rather than implement everything that you already know how to do from scratch. I start to relax those requirements a little bit. So what does it look like for this class? I'm actually just gonna read this paragraph. I think it summarizes it really well. AI is playing a larger role in professional software development, so it is allowed in this course in a limited capacity. In the GitHub repository for your project, you will create a folder called AI with subfolders for Sprint 1 through Sprint 4. Subfolders for this will include the names of each of your group mates, the developers. Within each of those folders, you're going to keep a text history of the entire prompt response that you use AI for, that results in code that becomes part of your project. And the reason that I want this is not to just to get anyone in trouble, or I actually want to see how people are solving problems at different levels of computer science using modern AI tools. So I am academically interested in your problem solving method. This is not just to create a bunch of work for you. I will be looking at this and analyzing how are people writing code these days? How is it coming about? What are you finding to be effective for learning and for implementation? Yeah.
Curiosity, how about like code that's like automatically like generated with like yeah, like JetBrains being
Yeah,
like,
don't
oh,
care.
I'm gonna-
Yeah, that you don't need to comment with that at all. If it's auto done by your IDE, yeah, it's you're already started with the process and it's auto completing your process. That's totally fine. But if you're talking to ChatGPT or Copilot or any other entity that generates code for you, so it didn't start from you and was auto completed, it's actually being written based on an English prompt, or even make code like this that does that. I'm curious to see exactly how your solution comes about.
Would you actually no mind, it's only you want documented like if it's code that's actually being put in and not
Yes.
what's not actual questions that are like, how do I do this?
Correct.
Without just giving me
Yeah, give me the portions of it that generate the code. Even if it's a process, I actually want to see the process by which the final code is generated, starting from the generate me this, no, that's not right, do this instead. Modify your last thing to incorporate this, running as efficiently as possible, or whatever it is that you do to tailor the code that becomes part of your project. If you did not write it line by line yourself or have it auto-completed by an IDE, then I just want to see that documentation. You're not in trouble by doing it. Again, I just want to analyze it, get a sense of how are people, my curriculum is going to need to change eventually to make sense of that and to incorporate it into the learning outcomes of the class. So I just treat it as data.
Is it fine to like edit it for just for readability's sake? You want
Sure, that's probably somewhat fine, as long as you're not taking out the main ideas of what you did. And I'm pretty curious about what the state-of-the-art AI is capable of generating with respect to the curriculum that I deliver. Very intriguing. We're living in very exciting and very scary times, both at the same time. I didn't know I could experience excitement and fear at the same time, but AI is doing that. So as you do this, there will also be an additional shorter text document indicating at the top level, indicating the line numbers and file names of the final code, whatever if you did not write something line by line, document these lines were AI generated. And then include that, and that way it won't flag anything. I'm not necessarily looking for a bunch of AI, but I have to make sure that the course outcomes are being met. And what that means is that I need to make sure that you understand the code that you are putting into your project. And I feel like the groups will actually self-monitor this pretty well. What this means is that if one person is writing code and another person needs to interface with that code, if the person writing the code is using AI and cannot explain anything about the code that they wrote, they just know, hey, it's passing the tests that I wrote, so it must be good, right? It's going to create issues for this other person trying to interface with that code. So all code that you generate, you need to understand well enough, and we'll talk about code reviews and the whole code review process. But to submit anything to the project, you're going to be going through the code that you wrote with another member of your team. If you are on the other side of that as a code reviewer, someone else wrote the code and you are determining how well that went and whether changes need to be made before it gets implemented into the group project, then you should be looking for, do you actually know what that is doing? Is there a better way to do that? And your group mate should be able to explain why the decision was made or what's going on. If you're using AI and not understanding that, scrap it and do it yourself. AI should only be used to make your life easier in terms of implementation and not to circumvent any learning outcomes or any struggles related to learning how to code. So that's kind of the boundary that I'm drawing in all of my classes is if it's augmentatory to your learning process, if it helps you to learn, I am all for it. As soon as it's circumventing the learning outcomes, that's when you need to ditch it. It's going to do you a significant amount of long-term harm if you're not getting the associated outcomes from this class or otherwise. And I will expect you all to police yourselves and the rest of your group on that. Do not let people use AI-generated code that they don't understand that then you have to interact with. That is something that should go in peer reviews. You can mark them down for effort for being lazy and AI generating something when they don't understand it. That's pretty poor effort. And technical contribution. They didn't do anything. The AI did everything. And they can't explain it. That's kind of both of those. So incorrectly using AI could really hurt you if you're not communicating it with your team. Everything that you do, your team should be aware of and also support at every level.
Out of curiosity, like each component, do each group member get like a component of a client's like a task or
Potentially, it's actually completely up to you how you want to split up the work. What I will do is I will give you a list of requirements. It could be that one person takes one requirement, one person takes another requirement. What I want to see is lots of pair programming in the class. I want there to be people working together to generate code. It will be significantly less buggy. You'll do significantly less work, fewer man hours combined if there are two people working at any particular point on a piece of code. So maybe even pair up, say, I'll work with you on this section, I'll work with you on that section. And that way your team works well together. And there's always at least two people who know how any particular component works. We'll talk about this and you'll read about this in the first chapter of the book called The Bus Factor. What happens when someone who wrote a very important part of your code is incapacitated for a while. Hit by a bus, gets COVID, who knows, they're just not accessible for a while. Or permanently, hopefully not. But how do you move forward? Someone else needs to understand what's going on in that code. And if you pair programs, someone else who is not incapacitated can step into their shoes and explain what's going on and work with it. It's only if one person was off by themselves implementing something in some way that no one understands that now you all have to interface with, that becomes an issue. So in general, that's the AI policy. I expect you to know what your code does, even if it's AI generated. If I were taking this course, I would probably, I don't know, I would be using AI for maybe 10% of my workflow. Whenever I know exactly how to do something, I know the exact specifications and I can exactly define that to a large language model, I would have it generate that for me. If there was any potential for something I didn't know, something to go wrong, something I need practice with, I would be doing it myself to get that practice. This is an awkward middle ground where you've had a lot of the basics, so you know a lot of the basics, you can save yourself a lot of time, but there's still a lot of practice that you can get to make that process smoother, faster, learn more, figure out what libraries are actually out there to support you. Libraries are also fine. I don't need you to implement absolutely everything from scratch. Just don't use a library that solves the problem. If you need to use a library to generate. I don't even know what it would be, but something small, some component of the project, fine.
I just usually do it for like the math I don't want to use. I really try to avoid AI because I'm like, I don't know if you saw it, but like MIT released a study that chronic users of GPT have actually been shown to have like a 58% reduction in their cortical spaces.
Yes. I did see that.
It's some
study.
crazy stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot to be concerned about with the use of AI from the end user's perspective, from a development perspective. I'm also teaching AI for cyber this quarter and eventually want to get into a master's level AI machine learning application for cyber. So I have a lot of interest in that realm and trying to make ethical sense out of what is actually going to benefit our society and what is going to be a long-term detriment. Very exciting questions, very scary questions. Fight or flight again.
Oh no, OpenAI scares me. Them specifically, they scare
They all scare. Any company that's in charge of something that's that powerful
me.
scare.
Well, at least with like models like Claude, they have what's called a constitution, like rules they cannot break. I'm stuck.
Any last minute questions about anything about the structure of the course before we dive into what is now 40 minutes of actual lecture?
You recommended using Java,
I do recommend using Java.
JavaScript with CSCD to help the graphics work.
So you can, I recommend using either Swing or FX. Probably, you could, and you can make that decision for yourselves. I'm not gonna step in and tell you it's right or wrong choice. But most projects that I have seen have used FX. And you won't have to worry about that till sprint 2. Everything will be command line only the first sprint. Other questions? Right, we will start an overview. Oh, I jumped to the fun slide that I had to right before class. All right. So other things to note, all of these slides will be posted, so don't feel like you need to write anything verbatim from a slide. I find it to be more important to focus on the commentary that I am giving and taking notes on that, because that will only be accessible at random points in videos that you don't want to go unfound. Truly cruel to ask questions. What was the 43rd word that I said on the third Tuesday of?
Come on, really?
I've thought about the worst way to run a class. I have a whole skit prepared for that.
Everyone get him.
Are you ready? Are you ready for the syllabus quiz? That at the very end of it, the last question asks how many points that's worth, and I just get the shredder, and as people hand me their quizzes, I just shred them in front of them. I think of terrible things that I would never do.
Don't let this guy
One day
ever
we go.
become dean.
Dean, we have a winner. All right, so we talked about the book, Debugging Teams, some other interesting books to read on the side if you are curious and want to dive into this in a little bit more detail. Again, this will be up on Canvas, so you can peruse this and find books and engage at a deeper level if you are interested. We already talked about the project, and obviously the only way to really understand software engineering is to throw yourself off the deep end and actually do it. I can talk to you about a project and doing a project as much as I want, but that's not going to be helpful to you. And industry solves ridiculously large problems. One thing that I would love to get more experience with in a class like this is actually interfacing with large code that you did not write. But I also feel like this is the wrong place in the curriculum for that, kind of like design patterns is wrong before this class. So maybe something for the future, but by the time you're done with this class, you will have written a reasonably sized project in these groups. So you will do everything from gathering the requirements, talking to the client, figuring out what the client needs. You'll be asking them those questions. You'll be designing the solution for that. You'll be converting the client's language from client speak into technical tasks that you then can check out and assign to each other on a Kanban board that we talk about. Ideally, I want this to feel kind of like a startup, where you and your currently close friends work together to solve a technical problem in a way that a startup might. In general, how is the project going to go? We already have our team assignments. Great. I will just, yeah, you'll review and analyze other teams' work sometimes. It'll be analyzed by the client when the client is interfacing with it. It'll be analyzed by me when I'm grading it, or our grader is helping to grade it. So there will be lots of eyes over this project. What that means is, please use your best standards and practices. I'm not going to tell you exactly what that is. I'll leave that up for your group to decide. Do you want some kind of consistent naming systems? Do you name variables in camel case or with underscores? You'll want to come up with something so that different functions within each class, between classes, aren't so different that it looks like another animal wrote it, not even another human. So different. What planet was this person from compared to this person? You want there to be something consistent across your code. So you'll be required to design and plan all of those solutions. I will review your designs. That's part of what every other one of our labs. The first Wednesday of each sprint is going to be, you'll be in your groups on the board designing your solutions, and I'll be going between groups and talking to you about your design, giving you things to think about, analyzing your design, thinking about what some of the roadblocks that you might reach are. What are you not thinking about? Are you going down completely the wrong path? I'll try to catch all of that at the design level. So attending those labs is going to be very important, because at the end of that, you should all be on the same page about, all right, we know what we need to do. Now the question is just, how do we do it? So then you'll revise your design as you realize that it's more complicated than you thought it was, and that there were misunderstandings between you and me, between your own group mates. You'll do that revising, and then you'll also write all the tests. So we will be writing all sorts of different tests for this to ensure that it works. Because testing is incredibly important, and I will sound like a broken record saying that all quarter. Why do we do the project structure the way that we do? Well, we're going to be using Agile software development principles so that you learn everything about Agile, but the goal is to simulate the real world to the best that I can within the confines of this classroom. In the real world, you're not doing a ton of the actual development yourself. You're extending other people's code. You're making small changes. You're adding adapters into things, modernizing systems. There will be some aspect of that refactoring throughout the quarter, but we'll see how much we can reasonably fit in. And I do have you can be assigned to a different team along the way. Again, I try not to do that in a 10-week. So we had a semester rather than a quarter, then maybe, but in 10 weeks, I try not to. So what to not expect from this course? Please don't learn a new language while you are making this project. This is not the time to say, I have no experience with Rust. I think I'm just going to make this project in Rust and figure it out as I go. Choose your best language that you have the most background in, the most experience in. Hopefully that was part of your group discussion. Otherwise, you'll probably be defaulting to Java, which I still recommend, as mentioned, but definitely don't pick a language that anyone in your group has no or little experience. Don't expect to learn a ton of algorithmic tricks. You're going to be focusing a lot on the actual design, scalability. So you're not going to be learning about optimizations or how to make this run as quickly as possible. A lot of the content in the course will be focused on design, scalability, refactoring, how to make that as painless as possible. Because that is really important, especially in industry. And I wish we did it more at the undergraduate level, because it is so important. And yeah, don't expect to learn management skills from lectures. As much as I want to discuss what happens in our book, that's great in theory, but you will learn management skills from interacting with your group. And hopefully that goes well. So what are we actually doing? We will be building large software in a team. You'll learn how to get requirements from a client. You'll learn how to write specification documentation and how to design a solution based on that process of converting client speak into technical language. We will talk a lot about reliability. How do you ensure that the code that you create is actually going to do what you think it does and doesn't accidentally kill people? That happens. So we will be learning all sorts of Git. So version control through Git. Lots of testing, including automated testing and building your testing into GitHub. We'll talk about debugging, how do you ensure that your code works, and some dynamic analysis of your code needs to figure out exactly what your code is doing in small snippets rather than as a whole. Definitions, kind of boring. Application of a systemic, disciplined, quantifiable approach to the development, operation, and maintenance of software. That is the application of engineering to software. No one likes reading dictionary definitions, but there it is. It's expected on day one. It's defined, I don't know. What do we think about this, I guess? It's hard to define software engineering as in a cohesive whole. It kind of seems like engineering wrote it. The application of engineering to software, and we'll talk about why that doesn't necessarily work the way that historically it was thought. So, descriptive, not prescriptive, doesn't tell you how to design software. Doesn't give you any way to know if you've succeeded or failed. And because of that, people can interpret it differently, which shows that it's not actually that great of a definition. Let's talk about some myths. We hear these floating around from time to time, and it's good to dispel them right from day one. So one thing someone might say, we have books with rules, isn't that everything my people need? And obviously, different books, different requirements, different ways of doing things. Which one is correct? If they contradict each other, how do we resolve that? So usually this ends up being working with the people you're working with. You will have processes that work with these individuals, and you will figure out what your place is in that process through engaging with it. Do not look for books with rules to try to figure out how to handle humans. Psychology is complicated. If we fall behind, we'll just add more programmers. Onboarding into a new software project is incredibly difficult. People make so many more mistakes when they don't have a basis for what they are contributing to. So if you add people to a late project, it just makes it later, just because the developers who actually know what they were doing are now spending half of their day explaining things to the newly onboarded developers. Ridiculous. We can outsource it, just have someone else finish it off for us. And of course, if you can't manage and implement and control your own project at an internal level, how do you expect to be able to communicate it with others so that they give you what you're looking for? Figure out the communication issues that are right here before you try to offload and create more communication issues. So these kinds of myths, if you end up in a software engineering role and you see these kinds of things going on, speak up. These happen in the real world, and I hear horror stories from graduates in their first positions where these things don't go so well. Customer myths. We can refine the requirements later. Self-explanatory. Might as well just throw your computer out the window. Good thing about software is we can change it later easily. No, we can't. As the implementation gets more and more solidified, the refactoring gets significantly harder to do as well. Who has experience with having a nearly complete project How much work is it? If you realize there's been some kind of mistake in it, that's not just a small mistake, it's a small design mistake. You find that you spend as much time as you spent designing the whole thing, just fixing that one small thing. The deeper into a project you get, the small mistakes, if you didn't design it correctly in the first place, that's going to become a massive headache to fix. So there will be a lot of focus early on in the class on actually designing well. How do you design to minimize the total amount of work that you go through in a software engineering project? So, yeah. Write the code, so it will be done faster. So don't plan, just start implementing. Anyone have experience with that, where they started coding before they understood the problem? I think everyone should raise their hand for that. I definitely can. I remember it. I remember every time I've done it and how much regret I have for doing it. So yeah, the sooner you begin writing code, the longer it takes to finish it, because you're doing the design and the refactoring while you're doing the program. And that's a lot to keep in your head at once. You will find yourself easily overwhelmed. It's better to have the documentation in front of you for what should this look like, and then take that and go implement. It'll be much easier to see what are the pieces, where does my piece fit into the bigger whole, what does this piece need to do specifically. The more design you can do early, the less work it's going to be. And also, if you're done faster, most of the effort in a professional software development project is spent after the first delivery to the client anyway. So if you rush it out the door, then the client is going to come back to you and say, I hate this and this and this and this. You're going to do that anyway. You're going to have to refactor and redo. So it is better to have a solid design in place, minimize how much of that there is. And if you design for scalability, then when the client does come back with changes, you can more easily implement those changes without gutting everything and redoing. We'll talk about all of the design patterns for doing that later. Till I finish it, I cannot assess its quality. Yeah, we can. We want to review the design before we get started. We want to review partially completed code, whatever we can unit test in pieces as we develop it. You will find significantly more bugs by testing as you go, or even writing the tests before you write the code, called test-driven development. We'll talk about that later. There is no time to engineer the software. If anyone says that, they're just asking to redo it all from scratch once they actually understand the project. What do we want to do? We're going to build the system from scratch. How do we know the system works? We need to figure out how to thoroughly test that system and make sure that it works at the unit level, at the integration level, at the functional level, and once you have versioning going on at the regression level. Lots of different levels of testing to make sure are in your project, but we can automate a lot of it, which makes your lives significantly easier. How are we going to develop a system efficiently? We want to figure out how to maximize the amount of productivity that is put forth with the minimum amount of time and minimize the total amount of cost spent. Usually this is in terms of human hours. How do we make software reliable? How do we ensure that our code does what we say it does in all cases? So yes, buggy software, very big problem. What's the most interesting or fun bug that you've ever experienced with anything that you've interfaced with? Just kind of as a fun question. Anyone have any stories or experiences with fun or terrible bugs?
So I was building this program. Basically it was like an integrated calendar system. And I had chased this one bug with my calendar dating system, or I shit you not, excuse my language, for a few days at least. Turns out I go back, I read the code line by line after just like not finding it. It was literally just a single lowercase letter where it should have been uppercase.
Yeah.
That was breaking the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I
It's
like,
usually something really small, but it can have drastic effects on how the application works. Anything that either you didn't design or you've experienced in a game, some other software, the weirdest thing you've had happen?
210 to 11 launching buttons. The code works, but you don't know why it doesn't work.
Yeah, they're tough to hunt down.
Something inside of like Epic Games, so for example, Fortnite, like the code that's written for Fortnite is based off of another game. And basically, there's a module inside of the Fortnite code for calculating hit damage. That there's a sub-module that is a requirement for that module, but it's not implemented in that game, but it is implemented in a different Epic game. And if you remove that, it breaks all of the hit point calculation in that game.
Interesting. Yeah. Any legacy references to something that? Yeah, interesting. 1 and 2.
In Final Fantasy 14, you're not supposed to be able to move while you're casting a spell, but you can, and it's dependent on what your ping is. So the better your ping, the less you can move. And that was a bug originally discovered like that in like the first expansion, and it's now considered a feature because they can't be arsed to chase that down. It's unfortunate. It's like
In Fallout New Vegas, there's a perk where you can take it, you get more resistance to laser weaponry. Great. Except inside the code, it lists like laser weaponry instead of energy weapons. I don't remember the exact reference, but it references something that doesn't actually exist in the game. So taking the perk effectively does nothing because the text required, like the objects that's referring to don't exist.
Interesting. Interesting. All sorts of issues just within software that you experience daily. Of course, it can be significantly worse than that if you're responsible for significantly larger things than that. What's unfortunate is I never change these examples and they just get older every year. So stick with me that some of this happened before you were born. The Ariane 5 crashed in '96, and the only bug was cramming a double into an int. All they did.
There was another one with one of the Mars probes. Basically, the engineers of the system worked in imperial units. So Boeing, they work in imperial units, but NASA works in metric. And so there was a miscommunication between the system computer and NASA's units, and they were assuming the system was in metric, and they crashed it into a planet because bad calcs.
Yep. It's very easy to do. Indirect costs, $2 billion. That's in $96. How much inflation has happened since then? I have this from '95. I think the more relevant example is the 737 MAX issues that showed up over the last few years and crashes that were associated with software errors that ended up costing hundreds of lives. And that is a massive tragedy and one that is completely avoidable. So other kinds of software errors, radiotherapy machines, software error can dose them with too much radiation and kill them. People have to write the software for that.
Yeah, didn't that happen in the '80s?
Yeah, it was older.
This reminds me of the Borgorski incident, where he got shot by a particle accelerator because a bulb was out, and the software didn't alert him that the danger bulb wasn't lit because it was supposed to, and he got hit straight through the head with a particle.
All sorts of issues with modern day self-driving cars and the associated lawsuits from that. Be responsible for that kind of software. How do you ensure that it works and is not going to injure or kill people, animals?
Senior devs only.
Yeah. Debit credit cards rendered unreadable for a software bug in 2010. The examples go on and on. But the number that I did actually look up to update is now it is approximated that about $2.41 trillion of loss has occurred annually due to software bugs. That is a lot of money that is just being thrown away due to preventable measures. So from a company perspective, keep in mind, you're going to be working for a company that's going to care about its bottom line. If you can help with that bottom line via less indirect cost due to software bug, that will make you look good. So this number can be reduced if we learn how to make our software more reliable, and there are certainly plenty of ways to do that. So how do we identify bugs? If the program is very small, like maybe you developed in a past class, you just run it a few times with some test cases. And if some of the test cases come out with something you don't expect, there's a bug somewhere. In reality, there's going to be some specification, and the specification is going to state what the program needs to do and how. And if you adhere to all of the specifications in a well-written specification document, there is no way that you can be held responsible for anything wrong because it wasn't in the specification document. So sometimes you will be responsible for writing those specification documents, sometimes directly after communicating with clients. And the hard part of communicating with clients is that they don't speak the same technical lingo that you do. So you will need to interpret what they want, come up with the associated specification for what you need to design, convert that into technical requirements, implement the technical requirements, and then go back to the client who says, why'd you make that? It's not what I asked for. And you start all over again. I actually have a comic that's going to go through some of that here momentarily. But do we really need to write specifications? Is that a necessary part of development? Once you're writing a large enough program, the answer is yes. Once you're in a team of enough people who think differently and implement things in different ways, you need a common document to go refer to so that you can make sure that you're designing it correctly. To make sure that you're doing it the right way, discuss in general what you're going to do. Divide up the work because we can't all do it all together all the time. You all have different schedules and availabilities, but do try to pair program occasionally. It'll make your life a lot easier. Implement any incompatible components. So anything that is separate. And of course, what do we do when it's all done? Be surprised when it doesn't just happen to work because there are communication issues. So let's see this. This is my favorite part of this entire class, by the way, is this comic. So here is what the customer explained that they want. This is what we see as a customer explaining what they want us to make. Of course, the project leader sees it as, okay, well, all right, here's what I understand. So this is what we're going to make. All right, making that, of course, the analyst is like, well, that makes no sense. It's just gonna crash into the tree. So we need to take out chunks of the tree and add supports so that this swing actually works in a way that is, it's what the customer obviously wanted. There's no way that the project lead could possibly want me to do that. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But the programmer, not really able to implement all of that in a short period of time, implements some pretty buggy version of that. We put the components together, it works, kind of, if you do a bunch of the work for me. So that's how the programmer writes it. Of course, the business consultant sees that and says, well, that's never going to fly with the client. What we're designing you is everything you've ever wanted. So this sets the client's expectation of you're going to get the coolest, best thing that has ever been presented, ever been made in the history of ever. But the project was documented like this. Oh. So when we need to go back and fix things because the programmer didn't really get around to it, there's no documentation to go fix the problem to make what either the customer explained, the project leader understood, or the analyst designed, so that we can go back and fix that. So operations, unable to do much with all of the work that's been done so far, goes and installs this. This is about as much as we can do with how much work has been done. So here you go. The customer is then billed for the associated work.
This just gets more and more ridiculous. I love that.
Like I said, my favorite part of the whole class. This is a really old comic, by the way, but it's phenomenal. But of course, once the customer was billed for everything, it's supported as such. So no further work can be done on it because no one understands anything of the sort. And the kicker, The very last one is, of course, what the customer wanted in the first place. So this very succinctly describes many things that can go wrong with an associated development process. You will find yourself needing to communicate with a client, needing to work with other people in a larger company that don't share the same role as you. You'll need to be able to communicate with a project lead if that is not you, and make sure that you're on the same page. With an analyst to make sure that you're all on the same page. A programmer, can you actually do this? Is this actually feasible to implement technically? Maybe it's not. Or it is, and it's just so inefficient that no one will ever want to use it. Any questions on anything we covered so far? All right, so what is a specification? It's everything that we need to ensure that the software actually does what we think it's going to do. We can't really work in teams if we don't have a specification. If it's everyone for themselves, it will never go well. And of course, implementing all the tests that make sure that software is actually doing what it's supposed to. We need multiple levels of checking to make sure that we're doing the best that we can as a group. Programming is hard. You all have individual experience with this. You have some group experience with this. It's going to get harder in this class. So all of the fail safes to make sure that your project is the best that you can make. We will be doing manual code reviews. You will be looking at the code that each other writes. And at least one other person will have to check off and say, yes, this code that was written by not me meets my standards that I am representing the group for. You do not want to let bad code into your project. That will spiral. Fix it before it gets committed the first time. Of course, there will still be things that get through, but if you're really looking for it at that level, you will reduce the amount of headache that you have at a later date. Static analysis tools. There are a lot of these built into GitHub, so we can use code coverage, CI/CD, anything that actually goes through and says, here is where there are lines of your code that are not tested, or not every branch of this conditional is tested, or you're not testing multiple different kinds of this loop to make sure that its behavior is actually what you think it is. So you can get code coverage tools that help you to analyze that. All of the testing, we'll come back to it again and again, and we'll be doing a deep dive on this problem. How do we code efficiently? That's the goal of any employee in software engineering, is to be able to write code that works and does what is specified in a minimum amount of time. Usually we want to minimize time for many reasons. Time to market is especially important if your company has some novel idea. It's only novel if they do it first. Once you have that at a level where it can be patented, then you can start to take your time. But until you have a functional prototype that you can actually take to a patent office, you're in a race with everyone else who has those same ideas. So time to market will exert a lot of pressure on software engineers to get it right quickly. And usually that means get it wrong quickly. Of course, people can work on different aspects of things as well. So people can work on different modules at the same time. We get parallelism. You work on part A, I work on part B. Once part A and part B are done, we come together. To what extent does A need B? To what extent does B need A? So we'll work on different modules within the same project at the same time. And that saves time. That way there's not just one thread. Think of it like parallelism in a CPU. You can schedule, think of it as a scheduling problem for yourselves. There's a sprint, there's this much that needs to be done. Before we start task 7, tasks 1 and 2 need to be done. So come up with an associated schedule and associated constraints and prerequisites for each of your tasks, so that you're not just saying you're responsible for this large section with no further analysis. Break it down into small tasks and their associated prerequisites so that you can figure out, all right, who can work on what in parallel in mini sprint number 1, 2, 3, 4, then you come together. pitfalls of doing that, same as in parallel computing. The more people you add to a project, the more communication is needed. In fact, to what extent does it grow? I add a new person, how many more communication lines are there?
How many people are in the group plus one?
So I add a 6th person to a 5-person group, person 6, and I need to communicate with person 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, assuming all 5 were already communicating. So I use this in every single class that I teach. A 1-person group, add a 2nd person plus 2, another person plus 3, another person plus 4. What order is that in? Sorry?
Factorial.
It is not factorial. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 up to plus n. Anyone who took data structures from me?
Or like n plus, or n times n plus one over two.
Yeah, that, which ends up being quadratic. Yeah, so it is quadratic in nature. Every time you add a new person, you're basically growing your communication requirements at the same rate as a quadratic algorithm. Which is not ideal when there are humans involved in the process. A computer, quadratic is usually okay, but computers do billions of calculations every second. We do not. So more communication just means more work to ensure that you're all on the same page. As soon as one person's not on the same page, then all of the work that they do needs to be refactored, reconsidered. So it's harder in larger groups. And then individual tasks also can't be too fine-grained, something like, you write this print statement. All right, you need to give them a large enough task that it's something that they can test themselves and not something that's so interdependent that it's trivial.
Talking about methods.
Yeah, either methods or features, or if you're trying to break down a method, you write the first 3 lines, I'll write the second 3 lines. It's too fine-grained. It's too specific to parallelize. Someone should be responsible for some problem, the completion of some feature or function that does not rely on other components. But if it relies on itself, then if you need more than one person, rope in a 2nd person and pair program, rather than splitting the process into 2 components that each person works on part of. We'll talk about interfaces as well, kind of the boundary between components in a large scale software system. So what works are done at the same time have to be independent of each other. They can't rely on each other to too much of an extent. Like, I can't test this at all until this is done. Some other piece is done. If that's the case, I should not be working on this until this is done. We definitely need interfaces between components because it also isolates. You know that if everything relies on everything else, again, that also grows quadratically. If you have some independence between the different modules in your program, you can write and test this separately, write and test this separately, test the components as they come together, and it's a lot less work than writing a bunch of jumbled gobbledygook and trying to make sure that it all communicates with each other all at the same time. Interfaces themselves are just mini specifications. That's the way that I like to think of it. So break your specification down into its components, arrange them in terms of prerequisites, and then off you can go. So interfaces are boundaries between components and also boundaries between people. It's one way to think about that as well. So interfaces should not change. Take the time to communicate and make sure everyone understands this is where your component stops and my component begins. Don't do my work, I won't do your work. Let's see. Yep. Decompose a system into its pieces. That makes sense. Any large scale software can be broken down into smaller scale software, which can be broken down into smaller scale software. The idea is to do that as much as possible until you have a manageable chunk of a subproblem of a subproblem of a subproblem of what I asked you to do. Try to keep those pieces small and manageable. If they are large tasks, it leads to fallibility of overcomplication, confusion. we'll talk about testing later, but formal verification is another topic that we'll talk about, how to mathematically prove that your program works the way that you intend it to. So we'll talk about the actual logic behind how you can do that. It's kind of a pain. As an example, does this do what you think it's supposed to? Imagine that you are asked by one of your group mates, can you verify my program? There's an issue with this question. What is the question? What is the issue with the question?
What is it supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't know that, but also what aspect of verification? What are you looking to get an answer for? So the response should be which property? So you can ask questions like, will the program crash? Does it compute a correct result? Does it leak private information? How long does it take to run? How much power does it consume when it runs? Will it turn off automated cruise control when I do it? All sorts of questions that are all roped under program correctness, but not defined by program correctness. So if you're asking a fellow group member for assistance with something or to verify something, be specific. Ask, and this is also the approach you should take to writing tests as well. It's not just, I wrote a test, it passed, great. Think about all of the different possible ways it could fail or not do what you intend. It could be just what's responsible for your program lagging. Even though it technically works on your machine, put it into its components, there's lag. Did you test for that? How do you do it mathematically? So now this person comes back to you and says, I just want to be sure that no element is lost in this linked list. If I insert an element, is it actually in the list? Great. Now we can actually start to write a test. You can start writing annotations. You can start going through a logical proof that an insert does what you think an insert should. So annotations like this for program correctness, again, we'll take a deep dive on this later in the quarter, written by a programmer or analyst, added to the program, and then you can now run using a logic language to actually go verify and prove this particular property. And that way you don't need to write tests and hope that your tests are thorough. Mathematical proof of things is wonderful. That said, we get some problems. So you get logic. Hope everyone enjoyed 301 because that'll come back a little bit in that one lecture. And then you can derive formulas. So basically it just looks like we take the program and the annotations, we feed it to a logical verifier, spits out associated formulas. We feed the formulas to a theorem prover, an abstract theorem prover, which then says, yes, this does what you think it does, or no, it does not do what you think it does. Of course, this makes it look really easy, but of course, and this is getting more and more outdated. Sorry, see pictures. Windows 10, 50 million lines of source code. We should probably be automating some of that verification. You do not want to be the person responsible for writing all of the tests that ensure that Windows 10 does everything it's supposed to. It's a lot of tests. It's a lot of time. Microsoft does not have that kind of time. They probably have that much money though. We are out of time basically, so we will come back to this tomorrow. We have a little bit more to go through before we are fully ready to kickstart our project, but we're making progress. We're getting there. So I will see you tomorrow at 10 in here for that.
Yeah, probably.
I saw.
Are you listening to like 2 hours? I go to bed.